Hello, everyone. I'm just going to let you take a few moments to join us this evening. It can take a little while for everyone to trickle into Zoom, even though we're used to it now. We are joined this evening by Jill Fanshawe Kato, and Jill is actually celebrating her 5th exhibition with the gallery at the moment, and it's a wonderful show because we're looking at nature. We're looking at nature in every sense. So we've got clay, we've got creatures depicted on the surface, we've even got leaves that have been involved in the process. There's an awful lot to discover. So what we'll do this evening is we're going to have a question and answer with Jill. She's going to talk about her work. I'm sharing my screen so that you can see some of the beautiful pieces we're talking about and let you see a little glimpse into the gallery as well. But please, if you've got any questions, please just put them to us. There's a little Q&A section, so you can type them there, and my colleague Lisa will let me know, and we can find time to put those questions to Jill as well. So Jill, welcome. It's lovely to see you. We're obviously not in the gallery exactly, but we're in our virtual gallery, and we're going to show that a little bit later on. So we have a fantastic image here of 3 of the pieces that feature in the show, but also Jill, an image of you, the top right here. And I know you were wanting to obviously say a little hello and talk about some of these pieces we can see in the image here. So I'll let you do that.
Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for coming to join me tonight. Thank you to the Scottish Gallery for your incredible enterprise during COVID and for looking after your artists so well. You're very kind. And big thanks to my husband, Setsuo Kato, for his long-term support and for putting up with it. Hello, everybody. Pleased to meet you. So you want to know about this picture on the right? This is part of my garden in Devon. It's very big, and in winter it can be quite bleak. So I've been making some stacking sculptures like this to liven up the garden in the summer and particularly in the winter. And sometimes when it snows, they are the only brightly colored thing in the garden. I do like working large scale. I've made big commissions for, say, Yokohama University in Japan, of 10 1-meter birds flying up the wall of their lecture theatre. I've made quite a lot of big pieces, and I do enjoy working with architecture. But the exhibition that you'll see tonight, there are a whole variety of pieces, large and small, and quite a lot of small pieces, which I've been making in Devon during lockdown. You probably asked me what I've been doing during lockdown. For the first 2 months, I could not work at all. I was so upset. All my exhibitions were cancelled, and slowly things began to trickle back. But while I couldn't bear to go into my studio, I did quite a lot of painting. So I've been quite busy creatively, and started working quite a lot on this exhibition from the end of May, June onwards.
So, and that's the thing, isn't it? There's so much work that goes into an exhibition like this. You've got to plan your firings, you've got to have the ideas, there's so much time and planning at your end to go into creating a new body of work for a show like this. And there's what everyone can see on their screens just now is just one image of Jill's exhibition as of the moment in the gallery. So this was a lovely bright morning, and you can see there are all these beautiful creatures that have taken over the gallery. I know it might be quite hard to see them in detail, but we're going to show you a couple of closer images in a moment. But Jill, I was wanting to ask you a bit about this beautiful imagery, because the natural world is depicted in your work. We've got ferns, we've got grasshoppers, we've got birds, we've got regal peacocks. Can you explain a little bit about the effect that moving to Devon when you were young had on your work? Because I know you've told me before that that was a real turning point, and you see it as a reason why these creatures have come to be, or an important factor. Could you let us know a little bit about that?
Yes, when I was 10, my family moved from the city to a small village near Torquay. And it was May, and there was a hedgerow nearby which was absolutely full of flowers and bird song, and it was so beautiful. I just felt I'd been born for the first time, and that I had never actually lived up till that point. Of course I had, and I've always drawn, and because drawing, pen and paper are very easy to come by. Clay, you need so many other things to be a potter, and in fact, I didn't really encounter clay till after I left art school, but the hedgerows were full of beautiful birds and bird song. Everything was just stunning, and it really affected me. I probably got a gene for nature from somewhere in any case, but from that point on, I really studied the natural world. Even now, I always carry binoculars around, and I'm a keen bird watcher. But somehow these things that I love have found their way into my clay work. I could also say I love abstraction. I like working in an abstract way. So there are two threads running through my work like that. But Devon, growing up in a small village in Devon, I had so many animals, 120 mice, 15 guinea pigs, frogs, lizards, snakes, 15, did I mention the guinea pigs? 15, and apart from that, people were, local people, I was a bit older by this time, but local people were always bringing injured or orphaned birds to our house. And I grew up really looking after a lot of birds and animals and grew to know them very well. And I had a pet jackdaw who stayed for 3 years. After 3 years, my jackdaw returned to the wild, joined the wild jackdaws. But these were very pivotal experiences for me to be so close to nature. And though we didn't live in Devon, we only lived in Devon for 7 years at that point, and then moved back to London. But it's left a lasting interest in natural history. And when I can't find it, I watch David Attenborough on television, or wherever we are, even in the middle of Tokyo. I've always managed to find some nature somewhere.
Well, I'll let everyone just see a few closer images here. So we can see on the left, this is the peacock vase, and I'm sure people can realize that there's peacocks marching right round the circumference of that piece. It's yeah, really wonderful work. And then you've got this bowl here, this lovely organic kind of tilted shape, and then an example of some of the jugs. This is bird jug on the right, and you talked about the abstract elements in your work, Jill, because not only do we have these creatures, but we've got these abstracted kind of shapes, and almost the shapes to me almost mimic a bird in flight, or a swoop, or a branch, or a perch, but beautifully stylized, and your color palette that kind of falls throughout. I mean, can you tell us a little bit about the color palette in your work, that the colors that kind of come out? Because we've got lots of turquoises, we've got blues, that there's kind of recurring colors here.
Yes, I have test pieces in every firing that I make. I test clay mixtures, I test color mixtures, I mix all my own colors. And I'm constantly experimenting. So new colors lead to new designs. But behind that, the more important thing is the clay and the form. And form is a real challenge for me. I love being able to form things from such a soft material. I'll just show you. But this is, can you see it?
If I stop sharing a second, let me just stop this. There we go. That allows everyone to see a larger screen, Jill.
That's the lump of clay. That's the starting point. And it's such a soft material, so tactile. That's okay. And creating forms is a great challenge for me, and I like to think of the forms first and the designs on the forms as something of an accent, hopefully to accentuate the shape rather than to overwhelm it. I'm terrified of being labeled a painter on pots. So the firing is very important. The whole chemistry of it is important. It's a really organic process. And yeah, so that's always experimenting, which was your question.
And here's another another image here where we can see this whole selection of grasshoppers that's taken over one corner of the gallery, and then the birds on these larger pieces. So that's the other thing, is that in your work you talked about form, but you really play with scale. You mentioned at the start some of the commissions that you've had have been really sizable. That you talked about birds that were a meter. That's really substantial to undertake that kind of size. But here we've got beautiful small works, very delicate, dainty forms, right up to these larger vases, and the ovoid vase where you've got different imagery on each side. So depending how you rotate a piece, it can look very, very different. But they're wonderful. And again, these birds, just like they've perched there. But moving on from what you've just said, Jill, for those that don't know, Jill actually initially studied painting at Chelsea School of Art in London. So it was painting that was your background. But you've brilliantly said in years following that you traveled to Japan in later years as a painter and left a potter. So your time in Japan and the pottery schools that you were absorbed in obviously had such an impact as well. So you've got your location, you've got nature, but you've got your visits to Japan. Can you tell us a little bit more about those, the time spent in Japan and the effect that had on you and your work as well?
Yes, I've spent about 5 or 6 years in Japan altogether. I studied in Tokyo with a potter called Yosei Itaka, and I've also worked with a very well-known potter, Ryoji Koye, who recently died, who's a really phenomenal potter in Japan. I have one teacher in Japan who's very traditional, and the other, Koye, who's completely off the wall and mad sometimes. Everything he did was completely against the existing order of ceramics. Like, he would make huge containers, huge tsubo, big vases, glaze the bottom, turn it upside down, and then the glaze would run down towards the top, which was standing on the kiln shelf, completely upside down. Some of these things were fantastic as well, wonderful pieces. I met so many amazing potters in Japan, and still I've had 46 exhibitions in Japan. So I've been continuing to go to Japan on a regular basis, especially for work, and with much support from my dear husband. But the world of ceramics in Japan, it's another thing altogether. And the first time I went to Japan, I was amazed at the pottery in the cheapest restaurants. You'd have a long rectangular blue and white plate for a long fish, handmade yunomi teacups, maybe 6 different pots, little pots with different food in, on a tray for a meal. And everything was carefully chosen with ceramics, and food really is an art form in Japan in combination with ceramics. But that was my first experience before I started getting interested in Japanese pottery. It was just that every restaurant virtually had the most amazing pottery, and much of it handmade. And then there are other aspects of Japanese art in general, the Japanese way of looking. And I'm talking about sort of traditionally, really, because with modern influence, Western influence, perhaps Japanese way of seeing things is changing a bit, but the basic asymmetry in the traditional Japanese arts and crafts such as calligraphy, which I studied in Japan, Japanese writing, and in the buildings in Ikebana, which I've also studied, where the rules are that the center stem of the arrangement is 85 degrees. It's off center, nothing is center. And the stage of the kabuki theater, traditional Japanese theater, is very long and narrow, whereas ours is square. And I realized that our sort of sense of balance and symmetry is so different, really hails from Roman and Greco-Roman times, those temples which are so well balanced and very square. In Japan, everything seems, well, it's slightly changed, but everything seemed to be asymmetric. And there's some wonderful, challenging ceramics made where they've broken in the kiln and cracked and sort of like they've been torn apart after 8 or 9 wood firings. And these pieces are highly treasured, you know, because they're acts of nature. And I guess that this sense of asymmetry comes from the nature of Japan, because 90% mountainous, and where there are volcanoes, the trees grow small and grow sideways in the wind and the harsh conditions. And there's things like bonsai trees where they are trained to grow completely asymmetrically. And I feel this essence of Japanese pottery is also, I mean, there's some very symmetrical work too, but there's an essence somewhere of asymmetry in Japanese arts and crafts. And there are lots of other things. It's all right to keep going on about and there was animism. I had a friend who stitched little container, little silk bags to put tea ceremony wares in. And at the end of every year, she would take her used needles to a used needle shrine. And I talked to a bank manager, a Japanese bank manager who collected pottery. And I said, why do you love pottery so much? And he said, well, it reminds me of my very old mother who's so frail and she's not going to live much longer. When I hold a pot, I realize this is something that is not going to last forever. And eventually that will return to the earth as well. It will break and return to the earth. And there's this incredible, profound sense of life in forms that some of us may not feel have any life at all. That has really influenced me very much. If any of my work has some feeling of life in it, I would be very happy. You can't aim at it. It happens or it doesn't. There are many, many instances of animism in the Japanese ceramic world, and the feeling that clay has a life of its own. That you asked me to talk about nendo ikasu, which means to make clay live. And this runs through Japanese ceramics, where the potter feels the nature of the clay and tries to go along with it rather than imposing a personality onto it. And letting the clay speak for itself. And especially with the wood-fired kilns, it's an act of fire and clay together forming art. And it's allowed to happen as it will, you know, and then random accidents in the kiln are often very highly treasured. So, I mean, I could go on forever about Japan.
Oh, it's so interesting because it's such a key influence, you know, and I think what you said as well, it hasn't been one trip, it's been, you know, recurring. It's part of your it's part of what you do, and you can see that in your work. These images here just give a little insight as to where Jill works. So this is your Devon studio on the left, isn't that right, Jill? From obviously the outside, so seeing a little bit of your garden.
This is I have my kiln, and I'm setting up some display shelves. It's a work in progress. I could also teach there, I'm thinking about it. But I also work inside the house, which is where I am now, because it's warmer and it's not damp. We have a stream running through the garden, so it can be very cold out there. But I do a lot of things there in the summer. Yeah, and gardening, of course.
I just noticed that the colors of your studio there and you know, the color of the grass and the flowers. It's the color palette we see in your work as well. You know, everything. It's funny, you start to notice the turquoises and the greens and the kind of work coming through. And this image on the right here, I mean, this is obviously your kiln, with some pieces that feature within the exhibition. For anyone who's got very good eyesight, they might recognize some of the works hiding in there. And this is actually this is your gas-fired kiln, isn't it?
Right.
And this is just another couple of examples to let you see work in process and get a little kind of idea of the processes Jill goes through here. So Jill, do you want to talk a little bit about the bottles on the left and then the pieces on the right? Because I know they're obviously different processes and things you go through there.
Yes, these were lockdown pieces, and I've very much reflected the seasons, which is the title of the exhibition. The vases on the bottom are for summertime, they're bright. And I made more subtle ones for the springtime with springing tendrils and shoots and plants growing. I was sort of so relating to nature during the beginning of lockdown, as it was such a consolation. Everything here was growing like crazy. And nature took no notice of COVID or anything else. It just grew and grew and grew. And every day practically there was a different kind of wildflower flowering in the forest. Anyway, those things did inspire me to make some stem vases, which I call stem vases for springtime, stem vases for summertime. I haven't done winter yet. But I make them in 3 parts. The top image where they're all brown, I throw the top separately and the body parts separately, join them together, and then I put a leaf. I have plaster molds with etched out leaves and growing things. I press the bottom into that, so you get a sort of raised image of plants growing on the bottom as well, if you care to look at them. I think having something of interest on the base of pots as well is nice. It's a nice surprise to find. And the one on the right is these are coil vases. I don't throw very much, though the bottles are partly thrown. The peacock vases are coiled bit by bit, and they take quite a long time to do, several days, coiling a coil at a time. And the imagery, these forms are probably inspired by Korean ceramics as well. I've drawn such a lot from seeing pottery in the Far East and elsewhere. And then at some point I decide what to put on it. These were for an order. Somebody in America asked me to make a peacock vase, so that's partly why I'm making it, but it's some ideas I already had. And I try to simplify the birds so they don't overwhelm the form, so they're like a kind of accent. And also I usually leave some clay unglazed because, well, that's my heritage from Japan, to show the clay.
Brilliant, thank you. And you just touched there, Jill, on travel. I mean, travel has been, not just to Japan, but travel has been such an important driving force in your work. I'm going to take us back to some visuals of your work here. Whilst could you tell us a little bit about some of the places you've been to and the effect that's had?
Yeah. Oh, that's difficult.
Or you talked to me, I think, about Spain.
Oh yes, yes. I've travelled a lot. I've been to some places with really powerful nature, like Brazil, the Maldives Islands. Coral reefs there are just incredible. Egypt, Costa Rica, Spain. Sometimes these pieces don't have a particular. I can't really pinpoint which idea came from, but I can show you a couple of things I've got here and tell you how they've been affected by travel. Can you see this?
There we go.
It's quite a long time ago, but my husband and I went to Morocco, and we went into the Sahara Desert, and it was a mixture of rock and layers of sand, and everything was slightly different, subtle color. And hidden amongst the rocks were these dwellings made of mud, Berber houses, I think. They had no windows in order to keep out the heat and the sun. It was 48 degrees when we got there, and it was painfully hot. But I was so impressed by the sort of natural landscape, the rocks, the color of the desert. I made a few of these forms when I got back, and these are probably my picture postcards to myself of places that I've been to. This is made of coils of different colored clays to sort of show the image of the Sahara Desert. And the buildings there all have these pointy roofs, African style roofs. And this one, we went to Thailand, and in the evening, it got dark quite early. It was very, very dark. And there were trees everywhere. It was really hot, and insects were singing in these huge leaves and plants. And the whole jungle image, this is my image of the jungle, with the moths flying around. The moon was enormous. The sky was absolutely beautiful. You could see forever in the sky. So this is the image of the moon, and it's black inside to show it's the night. So these are images that I picked up from travel, and sort of come back to my studio, and I've wanted to keep something of my journey. So I've got quite a few pieces like this. I'll just get one more. And this one, a few years ago, I went on a River Nile cruise. And again, the color of the desert was amazing. It was so dry on both sides. The only vegetation was for a few hundred meters on either side of the River Nile, and then it just became totally naked sand, heat, nothing else. And the ancient Egyptians and the culture, visiting those old temples was just stunning. Their imagery, everything else. And the lotus, the sacred lotus, is a symbol of life and death to the ancient Egyptians, because at night it would close. It grows in the River Nile. At night it would close, and then in the morning it would open up again. And they saw this as a symbol of regeneration and life. And I combined the sacred lotus with the form of the boat, which was my travel at the time. So that's that one.
That's so interesting. And we can see on the shelves in the background more of these forms that we recognize, the jugs, that lovely, the way that they lean as well, and the kind of handles as well.
You want to see one?
Yes, bring one forward. That, if you may, thank you, making you run.
Okay, the jugs, as you mentioned earlier, they are bird-like. And I've got a photo on my wall here of a 13th century Spanish or French jug, which also has a very naive drawing of a bird on it. And I think people have always seen this form as somehow bird-like. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I put eyes on them, but this one's an abstracted one. I think this idea actually came from Andalusia in Spain. That's another place that I find very inspiring. Spanish artists like Miro and Picasso I'm very influenced by. And I've been fortunate enough to be invited to stay in Talavera de la Reina, which is a pottery town near Madrid. I stayed there for a month and had plenty of time to look at Hispano-Moresque pottery with the Arab influence in the calligraphic way of painting. And Yeah, and Andalusia is another favorite place because the plant life and the influence from Africa, the Pueblos Blancos, these are all fantastic. And I've done a lot of drawing in those small white villages of shadows on walls as they move across. And I'm not sure if this one, but some of my imagery has come from drawing shadows on walls in Spain.
And Jill, we've actually just received a question here saying, do you make and mix your own glazes?
Yes.
But there we go, quick answer, quick off the mark. Are they stoneware or earthenware?
Stoneware, 1270 degrees, and where I can, they're fired in a gas kiln.
And the last part here is, yeah, this is a really interesting question. What is more important to your art and your work? Is it the form and shape, or the painting and the imagery that is applied on the surface? So form, there we go.
The form, the processes, the sheer hard work of preparing the clay and making things by hand, because nearly all my work is hand built. That is much more important. I find drawing and the designs so easy because that's my origin, and my challenge is with the form. And I mean, because I've drawn since I was about 3 years old, you know, I've always drawn. So I try to keep that a bit under control. Maybe I guess it gets out of hand, but I try to think more about the form. Like the three that I've just shown you, they're very different. I'll just go back if I can show you them again. Just a minute. Can you see them?
You go down, yeah, there we go. Yeah.
Yeah, they're very different forms. So I am experimenting with form. Then maybe I should do more. I'd like to have an exhibition just of my travel pieces, just big forms. And that's my challenge. To make small things is easy, but big things are a challenge.
Well, just to let people see the scope of your exhibition, I'm just going to share my screen again, but this time I'm going to take us to the exhibition on our website, on the Scottish Gallery website, and let people see some images of the work, but also how you can explore a virtual gallery that we've set up. So if you bear with me 1 second, I will just share that just now. So here we go. So this is Changing Seasons. This is Jill's exhibition on the website here. And we have some beautiful images. These were taken in Edinburgh on what feels like one of just a few sunny days we had in November. So you can see works here. You can scroll down to have a look. But I'm going to take you to the top here, and we're going to click in. And this is our virtual gallery that we have set up. So if I go full screen, it might look a little odd to start with, but what you're looking at is the work in the gallery, and then you can click for further information about each work, but you can actually move yourself around the gallery. And the great thing is it allows you to actually move and see the other side of an image, of a piece. So I'm going to turn around and look at this peacock vase here. You can then click to find out a bit more information for each piece, and it takes you through to the website. So it's a lovely way to explore the show. And Jill was talking about small work right through to larger pieces, and you get a little idea of that here. We know obviously not everyone can come in and see the show in person, but this is a way of you exploring, having a little look, learning a little bit more about each piece, and we hope that that helps during what is obviously a very difficult year for engaging with these beautiful physical pieces that you want to see in the flesh. So I'm just going to go back to our presentation here. And that's just another example of the virtual tour. And basically to say, you know, thank you so much for everyone joining us this evening. These events are so interesting. They're interesting for me to hear directly from Jill, to understand more about the you know, all the factors that go into creating these pieces. They don't just appear from your mind. There's so many factors at play. I think we might have, oh no, I thought we had another question. It's a thank you from our previous person there. So Jill, is there anything else you wish to add before we say goodbye this evening?
Oh, keep safe, everybody, and thank you for tuning in tonight. I haven't been able to see who you are, but hello there, and thank you very much, everybody.
Well, thank you, Jill. It's a fantastic exhibition. You know, it's called Changing Seasons. It really has been. These works have been created throughout all the seasons this year, and we're so delighted to have them in Edinburgh. The show continues until the 23rd of December. And for those that are able to visit the gallery, we have an appointment system in place. Not something we normally do, but we're having to do that just now. So you can find a link to book your appointment to come in and see all of our exhibitions until the 23rd of December. So we look forward to seeing you in the gallery. And if not, please explore our December programme through the virtual galleries we've created for you. Jill, thank you so much for your time this evening. I'm going to let you go, and thank you so much for giving us a glimpse into the where you're sitting and all your work behind you. It's really interesting. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.